Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into a case that, well, it's got a lot of people talking, the Karen Reed trial.
It certainly has.
And just to be clear up front, our goal here isn't about taking sides. Definitely not about guilt or innocence.
No, not at all.
Instead, we've gathered quite a stack of materials. We're talking affidavits, transcripts from the trial, some Google Notebook entries, text files, PDFs with timelines, legal docs.
Right, and even dipping into some, let's say, online forum discussions and more esoteric interpretations that are out there. It's a real mix.
It is. And our mission really is to pull out the most important bits, the really intriguing details from all these sources.
Yeah, to try and give you some clarity and context around the key arguments, the evidence that's being presented, because it can get pretty complex.
Absolutely. Okay, so where should we start? How about the scene? 34 Fairview Road in Canton.
Good place to start. That's Brian Albert's house. And the sources all agree there was a gathering there, night of January 28th, going into the morning of the 29th, 2022.
And we know who was there, generally.
Yeah, the documents list Brian Albert, his wife Nicole, Brian Albert Jr., Caitlin Albert, Jennifer McCabe, Matt McCabe, Julie Nagel, Sarah Levinson. Quite a few people.
Okay. And John O'Keefe. When does he arrive in this picture?
So the timeline suggests O'Keefe got there around 12:20 a.m. The story is Karen Reed dropped him off.
Dropped him off. Okay.
And Jennifer McCabe, she arrived later. She'd been at the Waterfall Bar before that.
Right. But here's where it starts getting a bit murky, isn't it? About whether O'Keefe actually went inside.
Exactly. Brian Albert stated that neither Karen Reed nor John O'Keefe came into the house.
But other info suggests O'Keefe was dropped off right there.
Right. And Jennifer McCabe, well, her account seems to have shifted a bit. Initially, maybe not thinking they got out of the car, but later testimony seems to put O'Keefe at the house. It's inconsistent.
And the cars. We know Karen Reed's black Lexus was there.
Yep, seen parked outside. And later, Carrie Roberts' SUV shows up with Karen Reed and Jennifer McCabe in it. So even just setting the scene, you see these little conflicts emerging.
Yeah, you really do. And those kinds of conflicts, they lead right into probably one of the biggest points of contention, that Google search.
Yes, the how long to die in cold search, or perhaps more accurately, the misspelled search.
Right, because the forensic evidence, or at least what the defense experts are presenting, points to a search happening at 2:27 a.m.
With the typo, how long to die in cold, and importantly, marked as deleted later on.
But Jennifer McCabe's testimony puts those searches much, much later, around 6:23 a.m.
That's what she testified to, yes. And she said she did it because Karen Reed asked her to.
Okay, so the timing is obviously critical here.
It's absolutely critical. If that 2:27 a.m. search is real and happened then, well, the defense jumps all over that.
Because?
Because, they argue, it shows someone knew, or at least suspected, something was terribly wrong with John O'Keefe hours before his body was actually found outside.
Which directly contradicts the prosecution's narrative and timeline.
Completely. It opens up that whole argument about third-party involvement, that someone else knew he was out there potentially injured or dying long before 6 a.m.
And wasn't there something about federal investigators looking at this too?
Yes, that's a significant point. Reports indicate that federal investigators looking at the phone data did confirm a search happened at or possibly even before 2:27 a.m.
Wow. Okay, so that adds a whole other layer of weight to that specific time.
It really does. It makes that 2:27 a.m. timestamp much harder to just dismiss.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit then to the bigger timeline. What happens between, say, O'Keefe arriving and him being found?
Well, that's another major issue highlighted in these sources, the lack of clear information, specifically surveillance footage.
Like outside the house?
Exactly. Outside 34 Fairview Road, there seems to be this big blind spot, roughly between 12:45 a.m. and 6:00 a.m. No solid video of cars coming or going or people moving around.
And that gap is important because
the defense uses it to raise questions. They focus on Brian Albert's movements, for instance. His exact whereabouts between about 12:30 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. aren't crystal clear.
you say he didn't talk to anyone else, right?
Yeah.
After people left, just his wife.
That's reportedly what he claimed, yeah. But then phone records apparently show he was in communication with Jennifer McCabe during that window.
Another discrepancy.
Another one. And the defense argues, this lack of surveillance, these fuzzy timelines for key people like Brian Albert and Colin Albert too. It leaves room for other explanations about what happened to John O'Keefe, potential third-party involvement again.
Okay, let's circle back to Jennifer McCabe then. Her movements, her testimony.
Yeah.
It seems central.
Very central. So the cell phone data analysis suggests she left the Albert house around 1:47 a.m.
With others.
Yeah, with Matt McCabe, Julie Nagel, and Sarah Levinson. Apparently after driving a couple of friends home first.
And they drove past O'Keefe's house.
Reportedly, yes,
Yeah.
and saw Karen Reed's car there. That's part of the timeline constructed from the data and testimony.
But there's more to her movements, right? Something about Michael Lang's house.
Yes. This came out, apparently, through federal analysis of phone data. It reportedly showed Jennifer McCabe was at Michael Lang's house on January 30th. The defense found this out during discovery.
Interesting. And what about her testimony itself? There were issues there.
Big issues. From the defense's perspective, probably the most significant is her admission that she lied under oath.
Lied about what?
In a previous proceeding, she denied hearing Karen Reed ask her to Google hypothermia, but later she admitted Reed had asked her that.
Okay, yeah, that's not good for credibility.
Not at all. And you add that to the inconsistencies we already talked about, her timeline versus the cell phone data for that how long to die in cold search. It raises serious questions.
And didn't she delete messages too?
She admitted that, yes, deleted texts with her daughters before handing her phone over to law enforcement.
Why, did she say?
The reasons given might be debated, but the fact that messages were deleted before the phone was examined is something the defense obviously focuses on.
And she was in contact with the prosecution quite a bit.
Extensively, yes. Numerous communications with the DA's office, with law enforcement. Again, the defense likely uses this to suggest potential coaching or bias.
So, putting it all together, the defense paints her as a witness with, let's say, significant credibility problems.
That's certainly the argument they're making. And it's fascinating how it all ties back to the digital evidence, isn't it?
Yeah, the cell phones are huge in this.
Absolutely huge. They're using location data from apps like Waze, Apple Location Services. Keeping in mind these services track location differently and have varying accuracy.
And experts are interpreting this data. You mentioned Ian Whiffen.
Right, a defense expert. His analysis, presented in the sources, suggests O'Keefe's phone stayed put near that flagpole area outside the Alberts house after about 12:04 a.m.
Which contrasts with scenarios where he might have gone inside or moved around significantly.
Potentially, yes. And then there's all the deleted data we've touched on the 2:27 a.m. search, call logs. Those texts McCabe deleted.
The defense frames all that as evidence tampering or hiding something.
That's the implication they push, yes. Suggesting an effort to conceal information.
What about other phone data? Like just using the phone?
Yep, they look at that too. Unlock and lock times, often using Face ID logs, and even the health app data from O'Keefe's phone.
Health data, like steps.
Steps, yeah, and floors climbed elevation changes. There's data showing steps and floor changes recorded around the time you arrive at Fairview Road, and then again later that morning.
Was that where the 88 steps number comes from? I've seen that mentioned.
That number floats around, but it's important to be precise based on the sources. The Apple Health data shows steps and floors climbed, but the sources we reviewed don't explicitly link a specific count like 88 steps directly to climbing stairs in that context. It shows activity, but the interpretation of what activity is debated.
Got it. So it shows activity, but maybe not definitively climbing stairs inside.
Exactly. And one more thing from the phone battery temperature.
How is that relevant?
Potentially, big swings in battery temperature could suggest the phone moved between, say, a warm indoor environment and the cold outdoors, or vice versa. It's another piece of digital forensic analysis they're looking at.
So the defense is really leaning heavily on weaving all these digital threads together to build their case.
Absolutely. It's a strategy aimed squarely at countering the prosecution's narrative using forensic data analysis.
Okay, let's switch gears slightly. What about Karen Reed's car, the Lexus? There was something about GPS data, or lack thereof.
Right. This is another key point. There's been a big focus on trying to find definitive time-stamped GPS data from her Lexus. Specifically, data that might show if she stopped at 33 Oakdale Road.
Which is Lieutenant Michael Lang's house.
Correct. But according to the sources, they haven't been able to recover that specific data.
Why not? Technical problems.
Seems like it. They mention limitations with forensic tools, like one called Burla, which is designed to pull data from cars. They even tried something called a chip-off.
Chip-off. Sounds serious.
It's pretty invasive. They physically remove the memory chip to try and read it directly. But even that apparently didn't yield the specific time-stamped GPS data they were looking for, or at least experts couldn't locate it, and other analyses were limited.
And the defense says?
Well, predictably, the defense alleges this isn't just bad luck or technical limits. They suggest it's intentional concealment.
So another instance where missing data becomes part of the argument.
Exactly. It highlights how much we rely on digital records and how contentious it gets when those records are incomplete or unobtainable.
So bringing this back to the core defense strategy, we've mentioned it a few times, it's third-party culpability, right?
That's the essence of it, yes. They're pointing the finger away from Karen Reed and towards others who were at the Albert house that night.
Naming names.
They've specifically suggested Brian Albert, Colin Albert, and Jennifer McCabe as potentially being involved or knowing more than they've said.
And this ties into their concerns about the investigation itself.
Directly. The defense has been very vocal about potential bias in the investigation. A major point is Trooper Michael Proctor's personal connections to the Albert family.
Raising questions about impartiality.
Serious questions, in their view. And it extends to the physical evidence, too. There are disputes about how things like the taillight pieces found at the scene and hair found on Reed's vehicle were handled.
Allegations of planting evidence?
Those allegations have certainly been made by the defense, suggesting evidence might have been mishandled or worse, planted. These are obviously very serious accusations about the integrity of the whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, our sources also included some, well, different kinds of information. Historical context, esoteric stuff.
Right, we should probably touch on that briefly. Some materials mention the history of the area, like Mother Brook in Dedham being a very early mill canal in America, sort of local color, historical backdrop.
Okay.
And there are also references to certain families like the Thayers and the Prescott Cannons having a long history in the Norfolk County legal system, spanning generations.
Adds a layer about the local power structures, maybe.
Potentially, yeah. It paints a picture of a long-established local legal community.
And the more unusual stuff, astrology.
Yeah.
Conspiracy theories.
Yeah, some of the online discussions and more unconventional sources definitely dive into that. You see mentions of astrological interpretations, theories about hidden influences, secret societies, that kind of thing.
And something called Operation Red Thread.
That pops up too, yeah. Framed as a sort of grassroots effort to uncover truth and fight injustice in the case. It's important to acknowledge this stuff is out there, circulating, reflecting the really intense public engagement, even if it's outside the courtroom evidence.
Good to know it's part of the landscape, even if we don't focus on it. So finally, let's talk about the federal involvement again. That seems pretty significant.
It really does. As we mentioned, the federal analysis reportedly backing up that 2.27 a.m. search time.
And confirming McCabe was at Lang's house later.
Right. Those findings, coming from federal investigators, gave the defense's arguments about inconsistencies and potential cover-up a major boost.
Any specific agencies or names mentioned?
We see FBI Supervisory Special Agent Nicholas Balance mentioned, part of the Cellular Analysis Survey Team, or SCAST. Their expertise in analyzing cell phone data is obviously key here.
And there's an ongoing investigation.
Yes. Critically, there's an ongoing federal investigation specifically looking into how the local law enforcement agencies handled the Karen Reed case from the start.
Wow. That alone speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It certainly signals that the concerns raised about the initial investigation are being taken very seriously at a higher level. It adds a whole different dimension to the situation.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, if we try to summarize what this deep dive into all these different sources shows us, what are the main takeaways?
Well, I think several things really stand out. First, the Google search, the timing, the misspelling, the deletion, it's just a huge point of conflict.
Definitely. And the timeline gaps.
Yeah, the missing surveillance, the unclear movements of key people during those critical early morning hours. That creates a lot of uncertainty.
Then there are the witness testimonies, especially Jennifer McCabe's, with all the inconsistencies and credibility issues raised.
Absolutely. And tied to that, the constant debate over the cell phone data, what it means, how accurate it is, what's missing, what might have been deleted.
And finally, the really serious questions about the initial investigation itself, the potential bias, the handling of evidence.
Exactly. What you see when you look across all these documents is just how incredibly complex this is. It's a tangled web of information, counter-information, digital clues, and human testimony. There are just so many unanswered questions.
It really shows you how tough it can be to piece together what actually happened, especially with so much scrutiny and conflicting data.
It really does. It highlights the challenges of relying on fragmented evidence, the massive role of digital forensics now, and how much hinges on witness credibility.
So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. We've looked at all these different threads, timelines, digital data, what people said, even historical context and online theories. Together, they don't paint one simple picture, do they?
not at all. It's multifaceted, often contradictory.
And it really makes you wonder, as you consider all this information we've gathered, what does the whole collection truly suggest about what happened that night? And what does it tell us about the ongoing search for answers and justice in this case? Something to definitely keep thinking about.